In today's video, I'm going to take this old aquarium and turn it into one of my best looking aquariums I have ever made. I started out by draining a majority of the water out of the tank. Once the water was drained, I began the hardscape. I started by placing 2 large rocks on the sponge filter so it's a bit harder to see. I then took 2 larger rocks to make an uprised area on the other side of the tank to add a bit more depth so it's not all just one flat area. I found 4 random rocks which I'll be adding to the tank, yet I only added 2, but the 2 I added separated a lot from the middle so I could have a small island of sorts toward the center instead of just having a flat middle area. I then also added 2 pathways behind them and sloped them up toward the back, just like before, to add a bit more depth to the tank so it's not just all one flat surface. Now that the rocks are done, I can start focusing more on wood to add a bit more texture to the tank instead of having just a rocky surface. I started with this large piece of wood, joined in the center of the tank to add a nice good centerpiece toward it. I then took a piece of driftwood out of another tank which had some java fern and anubis going on it and put it over the rocks to form an arch over one of the pathways. This is another piece of driftwood that I stole from another tank, but it will really improve this tank greatly as I was able to add it between both pieces of driftwood to add a coverage over part of the tank which shrimp would greatly enjoy. This was another piece of wood that was really fun to add, and just like many of the others, I just ended up turning into an arch just on the other side of the tank. Once I placed in the wood, I had finally finished the hardscape, which now I can really enjoy the fun part, which is adding a ton of plants all around the tank, as that can really improve the way a tank looks by really giving it some nice bright greens. I started off by grabbing some moss that I stole from a tank. I started off by tearing the moss apart, and then adding it to several parts on the tank, starting by up on the left side of the tank, followed by the middle near the water area currently wedged between some rocks, and finally on the other side of the tank wedged between a few of the rocks. Next, I added some of my favorite plants, Amazon swords. Adding these in, I had to remember these didn't get matted, so I proceeded to put them in the back of the tank where they can go as big as they want without having to be moved. I then added an anubis plant on top of the rocks as they are epiphytes and would rather grow on rocks than in the soil. Next, I'll be adding a weirder plant, a water onion, which has been growing for some time now. I added it to the right side of the tank, but with its addition, it meant the tank was finally finished. Even after it was finished, I still proceeded to add an extra Amazon sword, a anubis plant, and a ton more moss in between different areas, but now this would be the final result of the tank until it's filled with water. I filled it with water and let it settle for a bit, and I ended up placing another rock on the right side as the stick decided that it wanted to float, unlike all the others. The ground still looks empty, so I decided I'm going to add some smaller rocks just to improve its texture. Just adding a few rocks helped out a lot, as it can help break up the look of all just the black substrate laying around. Now that the tank is finished, I'm going to let it cycle for the next few weeks, and when it's done, I'll decide what twist I want in. I'm thinking of neon tetras, or maybe even a better, but let me know in the comments what you think would go really well in this type of tank.